So the question is, when the group or a person, which is normal, starts to go off track, and it's often because of excitement, interest. I mean, they're not doing it.
Passion at that.
Yeah. So it's never the group's problem. It's why you're there to facilitate. So if you can also get into your head, oh, this is a great thing. It may not be moving us to our outcome, but the fact that's not a problem. It's not a problem to be managed. Does that make sense? Because a lot of times it's like, oh, that's a difficult person. No, it's not a difficult person. They're actually doing exactly what you asked them to do, which is go and have a great conversation. So the reframing, number one, is first. You did that already. The second thing is to be crystal clear about your outcomes. And it's a judgment call. Is this connected to the outcomes? Or can I help connect it by asking a different question? Often a reframing question. So it's interesting you're talking about, so how is that specifically connected to application? So you can make a mental jump for them in a connection. That's another option, or that's an option, correct? One way is to do a prevention. Okay, so we talked slightly about preventions up here. In all group conversations, storytelling can be a problem. Elaborate, long storytelling. And it could be extremely relevant. And if you have all day, which you never have in any of your meetings, but that's why meetings go on and on and on. A prevention is to actually be, as you start the meeting, you actually state, you know, one of the challenges for lots of groups is out of our own excitement, we end up telling stories. And stories are powerful. They are powerful. The real stories are powerful. My job here is to, one, remind you at the beginning that there's a time and a place for stories. Two, the stories, if for some reason, it's my judgment call as facilitator, is if they're not connected to the, I'm going to actually kind of interrupt and ask you how it's connected. You do a prevention up front, so people are a little more mindful in the moment. You probably know that if you can manage non-verbally, that's the best way of all, correct? Is that accurate? Yes. So you would know, okay, people have interrupt patterns. So somebody is highly auditory, an interrupt is a visual for them. So you can do something like somebody's telling a story, and they're telling a story, and you notice they're scanning the group, and you just go like that. Totally interrupts they're done with their story. Everybody has an interrupt pattern. But you better be ready to then jump in there. With a highly auditory person, how do you know you have a highly auditory person in a group?
They don't stop talking.
They don't stop talking. That's one giveaway. Or what? They use auditory predicates in their speech patterns. That's another one, correct? So they'll say, boy, this doesn't sound quite right to me as we're talking, or this really resonates for me, and you can realize that. You can also watch eye patterns, because people process. Some of you know this stuff, right? People process, they access out of their brains. When you ask them a question, notice what they do to go get the answer. So if they tend to use their eyes, so Lynette earlier in one of the groups, she went like, you're highly visual, aren't you? Keith's going up there checking that out. Is there anything up there, right? Kinesthetic people tend to actually, there's lots of things they do, but their eyes tend to go down. So they're finding a feeling, okay? Verbal people, auditory people tend to go side to side with their eyes. There's a few absolutely called stable indicators of human processing behavior. Eye movements are one. You can get lost on kinesthetic learners, but in terms of processing, brain processing, you can see what they're doing. And if they have a preponderance of their time is using certain predicates, and if they process with their eyes the same, well, you know they're auditory. If you interrupt an auditory, what's called an external auditory, they talk quite a bit and they're auditory processing, both, okay? If you interrupt them, before you know what they're saying, you run the risk that they will then push stop, rewind the tape, and start over again. So with those folks, John, what you want to do is make sure you're crystal clear what they said. You wait for them to take a breath. Honestly, I'm not exact. You wait because they don't breathe a lot. And all you're doing now is waiting for a breath. Okay? And then you do a visual interrupt of some kind, right, so they can see you, and they'll go. And then you summarize what they've said, knowing that you got it. You have to know you got their point, and then they're good to go. They're fine, and the group is fine. When you have highly auditory processors in groups, which all groups, if they're of any size, will have them, what happens is the groups get fed up with them, and that's the only reason they're fed up with them. That's not fair. It's really not fair. It's their processing stuff. So a facilitator's there to help them get clearer, quicker. If you take them seriously at the beginning of their talking, they're not there yet. They're just trying to figure out what they're saying. Is that true? They need to talk for a while before you go on, okay, now I know what I'm talking about. They talk to think. Same thing is true in groups. Groups need to talk for quite a while before they actually understand what they're talking about. Does that make sense? This is a pretty important point. If you as the facilitator are up there charting too early, they think they've reached something way before they've actually reached an understanding.